Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Let's Chat with Binish and Mavish. Assalamu alaikum, Mavish. How are you?
Alaikum. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I am good. Alhamdulillah. So, we are going to be continuing on our previous topic, which was related to marriage. We talked a lot about the social and cultural influences on a happy and healthy marriage in today's time, which is sadly a lot more negative than positive. But inshallah, there is hope. We can change it, we can turn it around, we can still educate ourselves. If you're already married and if you're not married, you still got a really good chance to learn and find the right person for yourself. Inshallah, create a beautiful marriage. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to create a beautiful marriage using some guidelines. That's what we're going to share, inshallah. Always remember that a marriage or any relationship is a two-way street. It cannot be just take, or give. It's going to be give and take in a balanced way. And we need to work together to find that balance, inshallah. All right. So, yeah. What do you think, Mavish?
I agree definitely that it does take two to tango, basically. And it's important to have clear expectations so that you can kind of approach each other and find that middle ground and be flexible and kind of then have a healthy marriage. And I think
Mhm.
it's we're going definitely going to talk about how we can do that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, both of you have in any relationship, like we said, it's a two-way street. Both of you have responsibilities, both of you have expectations, and both of you have some roles to play. And that's something that we all need to discuss, which comes ideally, this should come before marriage in the premarital counseling sessions and meetings with your prospective spouse or potential spouse, but it's okay if you're already married as well, because you can always restart, you can reset and, learn and inshallah come together, sit together, talk about things and make things happen, create a beautiful marriage, right? So let's begin with the first and most important part of any relationship is to be self-aware. It is very, very important to know who you are, what you want, what are your expectations from yourself and from the other person. So we're going to talk in relevance to a relationship. Once you learn these guidelines, you can apply them in any relationship and create a beautiful relationship, inshallah. But we're going to be more focused on a spousal relationship because we're talking about marriage. So, how is self awareness connected to have a good marriage? It's very important to know who you are and what you want from your future spouse or your current spouse.
Yep, definitely agree to have clear expectations. Sitting down and having that conversation where you are telling the other person what your deal breakers are, what your expectations are in your life going on, and kind of revisiting every few years or whenever needed. Because as you go through life, you're going to have different types of stressors, and you're going to have to revisit and kind of talk and discuss what is working, what you can do better, and because your relationship is also going to change over time. And as you said, it's not just in a marriage, but it's pretty much every relationship. This is something we should be discussing and having that expectation set. So there are no confusions and you're being flexible at the same time. You are open to receiving ideas and also giving ideas. So you kind of have more effective communication and more healthy relationship.
Mhm, mhm. So yes, that's I would say that's a communication. So having communication skills is the most important part in your relationship.
Yeah.
Having a good communication.
Yeah, and it kind of attaches into what you said in the beginning about self-exploration. Because if you know yourself, is that's when you're going to be able to talk clearly and tell the other person what you want in your life. If you're confused about what you want, And that's just going to create a lot of resentment because you're confused about what you want and you're not able to communicate it. And the other person might be trying many different things and it's just not working out. So that definitely you need to sit down and kind of gain an understanding of yourself before
Mhm.
you can try to please or help kind of build that relationship with the other person.
Mhm. Coming together, sitting together, knowing each other, exploring each other, and being respectful of your partner's feelings and their expectations, also, both ways. And it's very, very important to value their
Hmm.
idea of a happy marriage, and then come to a common ground, sit
Yeah,
together,
and
come to a
I
common.
yeah, and I think that's a really good point to value what the other person is saying, even if it's not something you're completely understanding or is not that important to you. It could be a small thing, but for that person, you have to understand it's very important.
Mhm.
So just value and respecting what they would like from you and finding that middle ground
Yeah.
uh, so that you're respectful and basically nurturing that relationship.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Perfect. So the next point, which I would say, I think each of these points are very, very crucial for us to understand how they work in a marriage and our relationships. But this is the most neglected. This is the most neglected part of our relationships. We let people cross, we let people do what they want, and then we kind of blame them. And I'm talking about boundaries. There's a lot of misconception that surround this word, boundaries. This does not mean we are creating walls around ourselves. Okay. This does not mean we're blocking everyone out, we're shutting everyone away. We're not doing that. But we need to understand that it's important and it's okay to have healthy boundaries. And that's something you also need to discuss with your spouse before or while in marriage. You really need to discuss the levels of boundaries you are okay with and they are okay with. And it's going to be individual boundaries, and it's going to be a combined boundary as a couple, and then it's going to be
Mhm.
further. So it depends on in which relationship are you talking about. And so go ahead, Mavish, and tell me how important it is to have healthy boundaries.
I think that I would actually go on to say that boundaries are what can break or grow a relationship, especially when you're growing into a new relationship. For example, if you're a new couple, you then have to figure out physical, emotional, intimate, and even financial boundaries. You got to set that up for yourself and not just between yourself and your spouse, but for your spouse, between your family and you as a couple, right? Because when you go into a new relationship, you might be used to some behavior for when you were unmarried. For example, you might be used to talking to your parents about everything in your life. And then when you're a married couple, you have to set that boundary that you cannot do
Mhm.
that anymore. You cannot talk about your intimate parts of the relationship to your parents. So you have to set up that emotional boundary with your parents. When it comes to physical boundary, it could be something that you have to do when if you're living in a joint family.
Yeah.
So that would be a boundary that you set with you as a couple and at another family, with your husband's family. That could be a physical boundary about how you're living. Are you living separately are you living in the basement? Are you living in a different room? Are you sharing a bathroom? Those are the physical boundaries.
Hmm.
And another part of it would be emotional boundaries.
Hmm.
What kind of are you, if you're having an argument, is that the other family living with you, should they be interfering in your arguments? Should your husband be then talking to them about your arguments, or you should be talking to your family about your arguments? That's the emotional boundary. And
Hmm.
then if you go a little deeper when it comes between a husband and wife, there you also need physical boundaries at that time with your husband. Also, I know it sounds weird,
Hmm.
but you could be a type of person who recharges by being alone, by just having your own small space. We're not talking to anyone. And that might be an expectation. You need to sit down and talk to your husband, like, this is how I recharge. This has nothing to do with you, but I would like to be alone at some points of the days, like after an argument, just to process the day. So that's a physical boundary that you might have to set. An emotional boundary with your husband could be, your husband could have, or you could have, a habit of, let's say, joking around about certain things, and your partner is not up for that type of jokes. So that's something you might have to communicate and set that up. Or in another emotional boundary would be, saying the way you communicate is when you're really, really upset, you want the other person to just listen instead of doing something about it.
Mhm.
So those are different kind of boundaries that you will have to set up with them. And it is so important to do that in the beginning and keep revisiting them
Mhm.
throughout your marriage. And these boundaries are, of course, not just when you're in a marriage. It should be when you're with your parents, when you're as an individual. You should have these boundaries with your parents. Even with your child, you should have certain boundaries.
Mhm.
With your
Mhm.
friends, you should have certain boundaries, because
Mhm.
that what that does, it is sets that expectation that this is what I'm going to accept and this is what I'm not going to accept. And it's, if you set it clearly enough, and you don't have to do it in a very rough way, you can do it a very nice way.
Mhm.
um, and it, you won't have that build up a resentment in you.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, as especially as us as females, we're expected to give and give and give and give, and that creates a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, because we never set that boundary. We never set that expectation that I will not take any kind of interference in my parenting style or in my marriage. And now you're just really angry and you don't know what to do about it. So it's time to then set that boundary.
Mhm. Mhm. So again, these may be different ideas for both of the spouses, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to sit and talk and discuss about these things and be considerate of the other person, where they're coming from, what are they trying to say. We try to be more of a listener than the talker, and that's how active communication works. When you are discussing something and your partner is speaking, have a listening ear and be considerate. A lot of it is affected by how a person is raised, also,
Mhm.
what kind of lifestyle they had before the
Mhm.
marriage, what kind of family values, culture, system they are coming from. So consider all those things. You know, something that is unacceptable in your family or your brought up may not be as unacceptable in theirs. So you need to understand to allow them to be themselves in your relationship. And like you mentioned, if somebody wants to have somebody recharges in privacy and me time and alone time, then let them have that time without making them feel bad about it or you feeling left out. You know, so you need to understand that person is not abandoning you or something. They're just having their own time with themselves, which is their need, their basic need, and you need to be acceptable of that. So a lot of things are going to be easy and smooth if we only try to understand or let the person be who they are, have that acceptability, you know, in that relationship. Your boundaries with your spouse, your boundaries with your in-laws, your boundaries with your own parents, your boundaries with your children, they are very, very important to, first of all, create those boundaries and then reinforce them. And I know that in our society and culture, it's not looked at as something good or acceptable or something that is okay. It's actually looked at as haram. You know, oh, how dare you told me not to talk about this problem? How dare you not letting me talk in your problems or in your issues? But what you need to do is be firm and still be polite. So you can be firm and polite at the same time. It's very doable. Be respectful. but keep reinforcing, because this idea is a new idea for our parents and the previous generations, so it's hard for them to even understand what you're talking about when you're talking about boundaries or healthy boundaries. This does not mean you're shutting them away. This does not mean you're telling them, don't be a part of my life, but there is a limit to which you can interfere. You should be the one creating those boundaries, and you should be the one reinforcing them. And when you keep doing it in a respectable when you keep doing it in a respectful manner, people do start to recognize that and start taking you serious, and they start respecting those boundaries, inshallah. And there are different kinds of boundaries, like you mentioned: financial, emotional, uh, physical, intimacy. Yeah, so between spouses, you need to know what you like doing, what you don't like doing in an intimate space when you are together. And understanding the finances, or your limits and boundaries of spending or not spending, um, all of these things. So the basic point we need to understand is that you are a team. You two people are a team. You're not against each other. You are not in a race. This is not a battle. This is a teamwork. When you're coming together as spouses, you are going to be raising a family, living together, creating a environment of growth and happiness, and healthy relationship, inshallah. Those things are only created when you think as a team player. Of course, one person, maybe the husband is the leader, but that leader also has to be a leader, not a dictator. So that person needs to know their role. So as spouses, a husband, if you are assuming the role of a leader in the family, please know what leader actually does. All in all, it's a teamwork. It has to be togetherness. It should bring togetherness. That's why it's very important for us to sit together and talk about it. If we don't talk about it, then we just assume things, and that's where all the messes happen. We just assume things. You said something, I just assumed you said it because you hate me. That's not always the case. Mostly it's not the case. So, you need to talk to the person. Hey, what's going on? Is something bothering you? You're not this way. Don't consider a bad day, out of the 100 good days, one bad day overpowers everything. Don't do that to your spouse. And you're only going to be not doing that to your spouse when you don't do it to yourself as well. So it's a lot to do with your relationship with yourself, and that reflects in your all other relationships as well.
Right. And I think you made a really good point about teamwork, and how you are is how you're going to perceive others. How your triggers are going to definitely going to be something that comes in when you are having a discussion or just going through life. And I think when you're working as a team, when you're arguing, I think that's also when that is more important, that you should be working as a team.
Mhm.
Because if you're having a heated discussion, you have to keep in mind what your main purpose is, when your main goal is. And also when it comes to kind of leading a marriage, I think you can kind of exchange that roles, because I think as uh, individuals, we're all good at something, right? So just because you're a man or a woman, I don't think goals, the what do you call it?
The
It
role
should be
of
set that you're going to do this because you're a man. You're going to be, I don't know, driving around doing all the driving, or if you're a female, you should be the one doing all the grocery or the cooking. Because sometimes you can kind of, basically what I'm trying to say is you should be feeding off each other,
Mhm.
right? You should be feeding off each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Mhm.
Because as a couple, as a team, you should be kind of fulfilling the role where it's needed. For example, if you as a person is not very good at finances and taking care of in doing investments and taking care of budgeting and all that, the other person can step in, and it could be your wife, it could be your husband, but it could be someone that steps in because they're good at numbers.
Yeah.
And if you're great at cooking as a man, you can step in to do more cooking. I think we need to kind of stop genderizing roles. I think it's okay to step in. And of course, your marriage will be looking a little different than other people. This is something that works. So I think the first thing you need to do is when you're sitting down as a conversation is just take everything, kind of preconceived notions about what a marriage should look like. Just take that off the table and talk to each other as friends, as individuals about what you want to do,
Mhm.
what you like to do, so you can then work as a team and set those boundaries and gain that understanding of each other
Mhm.
and build that healthy relationship. And I liked what you said about setting boundaries. You can be firm and polite. You can be, you could keep doing that. And with parents, it's so much harder. You might have to do that for a very, very long time in many different spaces. When you have a child, you might have to tell your parent again and again not to interfere in your parenting style, and you might have to be very, very firm about it and very, very polite about it, and you will just have to keep repeating yourself, and it could be something that will make you very irritated or annoyed, but that you
Mhm.
have to do this. But it's just something you have to also understand where the other person is coming from. For parents, it is also a lot about, oh, this shutting me out, or oh, now you know everything.
Yeah.
Like that's the
Yeah.
best thing. Okay, you're grown up enough, so you know everything now, so you're going to shut me out.
Mhm.
But also I think you should have that kind of flexibility of
Mhm.
when to give in
Yeah.
and when to step back.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be setting that boundary to the point where you kind of cage yourself in, if that makes sense, where you're not willing to take advice at all, that boundary needs to be slightly flexible, and
Yeah.
it should work for both of you.
Yeah.
It should not be something that you kind of set up a wall for yourself. That's not what a boundary is. It should be
Mhm.
something you're flexibility to even maybe enlarging your boundary
Mhm.
after some time. You should be open and flexible to that, because especially when it comes to raising a child, it does take a village. So it would be something you might have to give in a little bit more than you used to. At the
Yeah.
same time, setting up that boundary that this is what I will take and this is
Mhm.
what I'm not going to take.
Yeah.
And you might have to set that up with your spouse as well, because you both might have different parenting styles
Mhm.
because they are very brought up in a different household. For example, your spouse probably didn't have a bedtime, didn't have a curfew, and you did. So
Mhm.
that's something you will again need to sit down. It kind of all keeps going back to communication. That's one of the, I think, biggest thing, effective communication. That's also something you need to learn how to talk to each other.
Mhm.
I think that's also something that's very, very important,
Mhm.
because it could be sometimes the way we say something, the tone of how we say something, it could be perceived differently. So that also comes in to teamwork, how
Mhm.
you kind of have that understanding that if this person is saying something, it could be it, you could change the way you're taking it, basically.
Basically, yeah, that's what I was thinking about too. Don't personalize everything. So if somebody is interfering or your partner is saying something that is different from you, or your thoughts or your beliefs, don't personalize it. They're not against you, they're just
Mhm.
saying what they think is right. And that's where you gotta be patient. Sometimes you gotta look over things, you gotta let them do their whatever they want to do. Sometimes let go. So
Let
when you
go,
said
yeah.
flexible boundaries, you need to have that wisdom, where to be firm and where to let go. So a lot of times parents will come to your house and they're going to say, hey, why are you not doing this, why are you not doing that, we didn't raise you this way, we didn't raise you that way, and how dare you and how dare you not. And all of this, those, like, because your relationship with your spouse may be looking very different from what they had or what they have been seeing around them, and that is just not sitting well with them. So they will come and they will criticize you and they will comment on every little thing. But take a deep breath, be patient, let it pass. Let it pass. Don't take things personal. You don't have to take up every single advice,
Mm-hmm.
actually perform it.
Yeah.
You
And
just listen, for 1 year and let it go the other year, sometimes.
Yeah,
So that's where you need the wisdom, inshallah,
for
and
sure.
patience.
And I think that's also when teamwork comes in.
Hmm.
That sometimes when your parent is telling you something, you might personalize it and you're just gonna be like, oh, I really don't want to do this right now. I think that's when the other spouse, when they notice that kind of happening, that situation happening, they could step in and
Hmm.
kind of take over. Like just be calm about it, just be polite. Like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Basically, you're tag teaming here
Hmm.
and you're
Hmm.
seeing that the other person is getting really irritated and really angry, the other person then steps in and say, I understand where you're coming from, but this is how we're doing things.
Hmm.
That's it. You
Yeah.
just shut it down then.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of teamwork, where you're tag teaming each other. It's not that you're you're trying to say something negative to the other's parents. It's just how you're working together on this, and you decided this is how you're going to do it.
Yeah. Which is actually bringing us to a very important point, is how do you deal with in-laws? I think a spouse should deal with their own parents. When you two are on an understanding, you need to convey that to your own parents, not to the other parents, not to the in-laws. So as a like, I should be dealing with my parents and my husband should be dealing with his parents, and
Mhm.
making them understand that this is how things are run in our household. Let it go, it's okay. And of course, be very polite and respectful. Again, I'm not teaching anybody to be rude with their parents. Sometimes you don't even need to address things, especially if you're not living together,
Yeah,
they're visiting you for some time. Ignore those things, look, forgive those things, because they have done the same to you when you were little, of course. So do the same. It's okay, let them have their time, let them enjoy their time. And they will eventually, go back to their homes. And if they're not living with you, a lot of the times you don't even need to address issues, you just need to be patient and let the time pass. But yes, if they're living with you, then you need to have some conversations with them, and have those conversation with your own parent. Don't involve your wife into the discussion with your parents, when you're having to telling your parents, don't do this, don't do that. You don't want your wife around there, because it's the kind of, it's the dynamic of the relationship with in-laws and a daughter-in-law is very different. We can't expect them to treat a daughter-in-law as their own daughter. It's just not natural. It's not going to happen. So if we have unrealistic expectations, we're going to be disappointed, so, unfortunately. And that's what we do all the time. Um, so creating those boundaries, setting those boundaries, if a husband and a wife come together and have an understanding on a certain boundary, the husband needs to convey that to their parents, his parents, and the wife needs to convey that to her parents. And I think that takes away the element of, oh, she said this, or he, stuff like
yeah.
that.
And I think it's also more respectful
Mhm.
because because the parents are not going to be able to talk to the other the what do you call it, the in-law, the
Mhm.
daughter-in-law or son-in-law, that clearly, that properly, than they would with their own child. And a
Yeah.
child knows them, then he knows how to introduce the topic and how to communicate to them. So definitely it's a lot better. And that's also a boundary you're creating, right? You're respecting your parent, you're respecting your wife, and you're kind of mediating in between, because you kind of have
Mhm.
to do that with
Mhm.
relationships. You're going to have to stand up for
Mhm.
what's right. And you will then have to have the wisdom to mediate that to both groups. And
Yeah.
and then create the same boundary at the same time. So it's
Yeah.
just something that needs to happen in that
So
relationship.
it's a
You
work,
can't,
yeah.
it's a work in progress, because you can't look at your wife and be like, if especially it's something that's really, really, really bothering her, especially living in a joint family structure, you can't turn around to the wife and say, well, this is how it is. You just have to deal with it, because that's going to cause problems, right? Or you can't at the same time turn around to your mom and say, well, she's my wife, it's our kid, we can do whatever we want, because then
Balance.
kind of goes into a very kind of a negative
It
territory.
becomes a battle. It becomes a
Yeah,
battle, and
it
that's what we
becomes
don't
a
want.
struggle,
And yeah.
right? And then it's an everyday struggle or conflict between the parents about who is right, who is wrong. And it's just going in a very different direction than it should.
Mm-hmm.
And just by having that simple conversation, if you can bring in about that change, that
Yeah.
positive change where
Yeah.
both parties understand
Yeah.
where what their expectations
Yeah. It's not about taking sides. So that's another very important point, is not to put your spouse in a position where they have to take one
are. Hmm.
side. Should not. And then again, it's a work. Relationships are does not they do not happen in one night. You're not going to build a very close bond overnight. So you have to really work. You have to be an open-minded towards this idea of constantly working on your relationships. And it's going to last until you're alive. So, don't think that, okay, 10 years of my marriage, I worked so hard. After 10 years, I don't need to work on my relationship anymore. No, you still need to continue. The things are going to be changed. The ideas are going to change. Each of the spouses, they grow and they learn, and actually that's another point. We need to have our own personal lives as well. So you
Yeah.
need to have a system where you are growing personally, individually,
Hmm.
spiritually, and you have friends of your own.
Hmm.
You don't have to share friends either.
Yeah.
You maybe have shared friends, but you need to have your own friends, your own circle as well, and that's so important.
Yeah, I think that's something that will help you grow as an individual, and it kind of makes your marriage interesting also, because now you're doing things like it's because after a while you're like, okay, you know everything I do. There's nothing happening. It kind of gets slightly boring. But
Yeah.
if you have your own strong group of friends that you're doing other things with, it's something you can kind of come home and share ideas and talk to your husband about, and it's healthy because you're growing as an individual, and you're just having that space for yourself, that you don't have to do every single thing with your husband at all times. I think the concept of, like, two bodies and one soul and all that, I
Yeah,
think it's kind of
it's
I to
old
me
fashioned.
personally, it's like almost suffocating. Like, no, I'm a very different person than him, and it makes it interesting that he is different from me. He has different hobbies and all that stuff, and it, I think, keeps a marriage interesting. And I think we need to kind of let go of that concept of that you have to do every single thing with your husband. Like, you go out, if you go out on your own, if a, let's say a wife goes on vacation on alone, it's a big deal. And
Yeah.
I think it's okay for her to do that, to kind of take that slight pause from her usual life and just recharge and come back happier and more healthier individual, because she kind of got that rest. And
Mhm.
I think both spouses should be doing that. They should be
Mhm.
taking vacations on their own just to process
Yeah.
and just to kind of recharge and come back to a healthier marriage. I think
Mhm.
that's completely okay
Mhm.
to do so.
Don't lose yourself, your self identity. Don't lose
Mhm.
it. You need to still maintain it. You need to still continue to work on it, because you are
Yeah.
an individual as well. You do have mutual goals, but you should also have individual goals, your personal goals, inshallah. Right. So mutual goals are really, really important. When two people come together, you should have mutual understanding, mutual goals, life goals, spiritual goals, couple marriage goals. And that's what we're all talking about. The whole discussion is about that. Um, how important is to have a friendly connection with each other, to be
I
able to sit together, to be able to watch a movie, to be able to laugh with each other and
Mhm.
then at each other sometimes, but that's
Yeah.
not, to be able to be playful with each other, tease each
Mhm.
other, have fun, joke around, all that is also very, very important in a relationship.
Yeah, and friendship is pretty much the foundation of every relationship, and marriage is the most important one, right?
Mhm.
So just imagine having that ideal relationship where, and I'm saying ideal because that's what we would like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something you cannot have. You can have that. And the best way of getting that is just respecting each other, and just also not taking yourself too seriously, if you know what I mean. Like, it's okay, chill, relax,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy, make mistakes, go out, do explore yourself, and just thoughts of others, just do new things with each other, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just do fun things together. Just, I think, it's changing now, but I think marriage is not just about coming together as a husband and wife and have rigid roles, traditional roles. It's also having fun with each other, being friends with each other,
Yeah.
and that would just make your life so much easier, because as friends you have a different understanding. You're not that formal with each other.
Mm-hmm.
You have more forgiving of all their mistakes, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just changes your thought process when you're
Yeah.
looking at your husband as your friend. It
Mm-hmm.
just changes the whole thought process and relationship. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if we started marriages not looking at the other person like, oh, he's my husband, now he expects this and this and this. Yes, he does expect. But now you're looking at your husband saying he's my friend also, and he has these expectations as an
Mm-hmm.
individual. It just
Mm-hmm.
changes the whole thought process. And I think
Yeah.
it creates such a beautiful relationship when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. It's a beautiful part of relationship when we are also friends. Having fun with each other is
Mhm.
very important because you're gonna be living with this person for the inshallah for the rest of your life. That's your aim, right? So you need to have fun with each other. The element of fun is something that's going to be the glue for your marriage to be strong and healthy.
Yeah.
And that
Mhm.
lasts that make it last longer as well. If you're not having fun with each other, or there's zero element of fun in your marriage, then eventually you're going to get bored. You will not want to spend time with each other. You're going to end up like down the road, 25, 30 years later, there is when two oldies are sitting together, they should be able to connect at a level of friendship, because at that age, what's left? What
But
else is left?
yeah. And I think that's why it's so important that you're exploring new things together, because especially when you have kids, I think I read this, I heard somewhere, where if you go on like a date night or just go out for coffee or something, try not to talk about your kids. And I was,
Yeah.
before kids, I was like, oh, that should be easy to do, but now it's not.
It's not.
Somehow kids always come into the conversation, and it's okay, but it should not dominate the conversation.
Right.
You should be also talking about what you're doing right now. If you're learn you if you're, I don't know, learning to crochet or something, and
Mm-hmm.
you picked up badminton or something, you
Mm-hmm.
should be talking about those things as well, because that will definitely make it more fun. Just diversify what you're talking about, because how long are you going to talk about the kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also when the kids are up and gone, whether they're gone off to have an education or gone out get married, it's just two of you, you should have some conversation left over,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if
Mm-hmm.
you have been growing yourself, if you've been teaching yourself skills or
Exactly.
exploring new things together also, or just traveling together also,
Mm-hmm.
you still have an ongoing conversation. It's not like, oh, okay, I don't know this person anymore. What do I talk to him about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You keep reconnecting throughout your marriage. I
Right.
think that something that we tend to kind of look over when we have kids, especially because we're so stressed out about everything that comes with having kids, that we forget to reconnect. And it could be, and when I say reconnect, it could be as small as sitting down and having tea together every single day, or over weekends, or just going out without your kids, going for a coffee break or a walk or something. And
Mm-hmm.
it would really recharge and energize your marriage. It will do
Mm-hmm.
that for you, because
Mm-hmm.
now you're looking forward to spending life with this person who is not
Yeah.
maybe doing all the things you would like. Because what happens is, if you just, as you said, if you're in those 100 days, when you have that one negative day, you start kind of focusing on that negative day.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're having those small breaks in between with your spouse, when we're talking to each other, when saying good words to each other, and just having a conversation outside of what are we going to have for dinner, or are you going to pick up the kids from tomorrow, like tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
If we're just having a different type of conversation, you're adding more good days to good moments, at least
Mm-hmm.
that stressful day. And it
Mm-hmm.
definitely helps to keep you going.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely, you definitely need to connect and on many different levels with your spouse, have variety of conversations, be interesting, keep your marriage interesting as well, you know. Um, yeah, personal growth. That's where the personal growth plays a huge role here.
Yeah. And you should be, I think, also cognizant of the fact that for as women, we need more emotional stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
For men, it's different. They want more physical intimacy. So that should be something you should be taking into consideration. Both of them should be taking into consideration for each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that also, I think, is something that can be communicated time to time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes what happens is you're so busy with your life and you're not communicating, and the other person might be thinking something else, you might be thinking something else. It's good to always just communicate what you would like.
Yeah,
If you would
yeah,
to just go out and have coffee or just talk, or whatever it is, just communicate that with each other.
yeah. So to sum it up, I would say the most important points you need to make sure your marriage is built on is communication, communication, communication. I think that's what it boils down
Go
to.
back to it all the time.
Yeah, all the time. That's how you're going to um, convey to your spouse what you feel about certain things and how would you want certain things to be, how your marriage should look like, how your relationships should look like, all of that. So it's just communication, very, very important part of the marriage. So after that, just remember that none of you is worth more than the other. You guys are same. You have equal importance in the relationship. You are partners. You have some assigned roles as well as some understandings of of different roles of who sometimes someone's better at something, so they pick that role, and that is fine. It's not supposed to be a fixed role in
Yeah.
every situation, and your marriage is unique. It's unique to you and your spouse. Do not compare your marriage with anyone else's marriage in the world, and you two are who going to create your marriage as what you want it to be. And um, external influences and pressures are always going to be there. So learn how to wisely tackle those and deal with them, handle them carefully. Do not let it affect your relationship. So another very important point is that no one is more important than your spouse. The spouse is somebody you start your life with. Once you start your life with them, your goal is to end your life with them as well, inshallah. So you need to have that closeness, that understanding, trust, and vulnerability with each other, that you two are, that can take your marriage as far as possible, inshallah.
Yeah.
Eternally, probably
Mhm.
forever. Yeah, because our
Definitely.
marriages move on. We believe that we are going to be spouses in Jannah as well. So inshallah, so we want to take it there, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. And spouses are, as we had kind of talked about, is like they're your safe space from external factors. So definitely have that communication. And I would also like to add, not just have good, like just communication, but it's also important how you're communicating, right?
Mhm.
Effective communication is also a large part of it. So just keep that in mind when you are talking to the person,
Yeah.
when you're doing it, how you're doing it.
Hmm.
And just, yeah, create the safe space, because as you said, this marriage is gonna, no, it's not just that do us apart.
Hmm.
beyond that, and it's
Yeah.
really how you are supporting each other in the deen and dunya, how you are talking to each other, because it's not the man as a leader is a leader in the marriage Islamically, but that doesn't mean that you as a woman should not be also educating yourself
Mhm.
and so guiding him and also helping him as well, right? It's a tag team. You're going back and forth.
Yeah.
It's teamwork. It's
He's a
not just
leader. He's a leader, but you're not a guy bakri, right? Either.
exactly. You're, as you said, he is not a dictator. It's
Yeah.
not that kind of relationship. It's a give and take relationship where you're educating each other and helping each other reach that that level, a spiritual level.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
definitely, that's something that goes back to
Yeah.
individual growth as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. So just remember that, give them their due rights and their the love and respect and honor they deserve from you, inshallah. And I pray that you receive everything back as well, inshallah, and create a beautiful and fruitful marriage. All right. So let's wrap it here, and we'll see you in another episode. If you have a question, concern, or if there's a problem that's bothering you, let's chat. Take care of yourself. We'll see you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
It's like
Wa alaikum assalam.